Even though nothing was expected, we didn't feel forced into anything. We felt like every step of the way, Eric and I had choice and decision in it. I knew going into it, well, first of all, a bit of our birth story is just that Ayla was 10 years in the making. So we knew I'd had a lot of years to think about it. And I am a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher. So I knew that I wanted something that sort of brought me into my body, into the experience, to connect with her spiritually and to sort of keep myself as calm and grounded as possible. And I'd heard of hypnobirthing techniques through yoga teacher friends. And then my sister had twins in France 4 years ago. And for her, it was a scary time because she didn't speak the language that much. So she had a lot of French doctors talking to her, couldn't understand what was happening. And they had a bit of an emergent thing that happened, and she had to have a C-section, but she had taken hypnobirthing and she used the hypnobirthing to calm herself and basically kept her eyes closed and hummed and used her hypnobirthing techniques through the whole C-section to keep herself calm. So I had that sort of background going into it. Told Eric it was something I'd love to invest in learning more about. You were so supportive.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it before, and figured it was worth a shot. I'm fully in my support role to make sure that Katie got what she needed, and I think it was a great balance between kind of the spiritual kind of yoga-y side and the medical side of things. It was a good merging of the two, to the point that having a medical background, I felt like I was fully engaged in learning something, but was also able to see some of the meditative benefits and things that could help Katie get through the labor process.
Yeah, and I knew I needed techniques. So like I knew from practicing meditation for 15 years that it did calm me. It did, if I could focus on a pain point in my body, I could dissipate the pain with meditation. So it made sense to me that trying to learn some of these hypnobirthing techniques would just give us a little toolbox that we could use and I could use throughout the process. And then I think it was just surprising to us how much bigger the learning was. I thought it was just going to be sort of meditation techniques and how to use music to calm myself. But what we actually got out of the class was so much bigger than that and carried us through the whole labor and delivery. And even now, we were discussing vaccinations and things like that. And we were still using our birth intention with Ayla, who's our little girl now. So I think it's just something that we've carried over even past the birth experience.
Yeah, and it being our first baby for both of us, I was surprised at how much more of a team effort it was than I had originally thought. And so I learned a lot of things about being able to support Katie and techniques to help with, and how much more of a role I could have in the whole thing than I thought previously. So.
Yeah, which made such a huge difference too, because Eric felt so present as a partner. I just felt really supported. It wasn't just Ayla and I going through it, it was the three of us going through it. So it felt really powerful. And I think the spiritual piece of it was really big for us too. Like in trying to connect with Ayla for 10 years prior to her being born, I would spend, so much time meditating, talking to her little soul, wherever it was, about how we could figure out how to connect and meet and bring her into this world. And so the techniques of hypnobirthing and how calming and beautiful, it just felt in line with that. Like, it just felt like a continuum and an extension of sort of the work that we'd already been trying to do together. Yeah. All right, so our little girl's name is Ayla. She's so sweet. And Ayla is a Turkish word that means halo of light around the moon. And she was born on a big, giant full moon, September 1st, 2020. And it took us 72 hours before she arrived to the full moon. So she's such a gift, though. She was 10 years in the making. And this is her story, her birth story. So I'm 45. So as we were going into getting close to labor and delivery, the doctor had asked us or really wanted us to induce labor a week early at 39 weeks, just for safety reasons. And it just didn't feel right in my gut. You know, I remember coming out of the appointment and calling Eric and just saying, like, intuitively in my body, it didn't feel right. And so we came home and we talked about it. And during our hypnobirthing class, Care was amazing and helped us actually work out a birth plan. But more importantly, she helped us develop a birth intention. And the intention that Eric and I came to together was that we wanted myself and Ayla to feel empowered and safe. And so we just took that one simple little sentence and we carried it with us through the whole birthing process, starting with that first decision. So whether to induce, we came home and we really talked about, you know, what's going to make us feel empowered and safe. And just with that first decision, I knew, you know, I think we want to wait a week. And Eric's a nurse. So
so I was a little nervous because Katie's blood pressure had started climbing a little bit, so that was a little alarming, and kind of led to the recommendation to induce, which is pretty typical in the labor and delivery world and in medicine. But I had confidence that you know, Katie knew enough in her body and knew enough about what was going on that I think we made an educated decision, and it worked out for the better for us.
It felt really good. So that at 39 weeks, we went to our doctor and said, you know what, we'd like to try and go to 40 and see if she wants to come naturally. And our doctor was really supportive, said, okay, let's go for it. So we waited the week, my blood pressure started to rise. And I was in the day before we went into the hospital to deliver. They were checking my blood pressure at my regular little appointment, and it had risen quite a bit. And they wanted to check me in right then to start induction. And I said, again, we had the same kind of feeling. We went back to that birth intention. And I said, no, you know what feels good is I think we want to go home. We'll monitor it because Eric's a nurse. And if it starts to rise from home, then we'll come in for the induction, which is what we did. Went home and watched a movie. And then it started to rise and we both looked at each other and we're like, okay, it's time. Like, it felt just like it was right, you know, because we had set ourselves up for that, to be okay. So then we headed into the hospital and checked in. And again, I was hoping for, you know, natural delivery, and thank God Care had walked us through all the different things that could potentially, you could be presented with throughout the delivery, labor and delivery, because we ended up having to do all of them. So we kind of laughed that, you know, oh, we'll be prepared if we just have to do one of them, if we have to break my waters or anything. But yeah, it slowly started with Pitocin, which I was actually really nervous about. I wasn't wanting to do Pitocin. But again, we kept going back to this empowered and safe, and if this would help Ayla come into this world. So we did that for a good, 24 hours. And I was having pretty intense contractions. They kept upping the Pitocin, but I wasn't dilating. So I was completely effaced, but I wasn't dilating past a 4. They think now due to some scar tissue from a LEEP procedure I had. So it was almost like Ayla was trying really hard. My body was doing the best it could and trying really hard as well, but it just wasn't working. So I forget what it's called, but where they the Foley bulb, right? So then the next thing they did was they went in with a Foley bulb. But again, because I'd seen it through our hypnobirthing class, I knew what to expect. I knew what they were doing. We knew what questions to ask. So I never felt scared. I never felt worried. And it was, I guess the biggest thing is Eric and I always felt like we had choice throughout every step of the process. We didn't feel like we were being dictated to. We felt like we could look at the hospital staff and we could say, we need a minute to discuss this and come to a decision. And when we did, it was always honored. So we did the Foley bulb, same thing. I didn't get dilated much past a 4. We kind of went through another day of trying to labor. And then we got to the point where the doctor was saying, okay, I think we maybe need to break your water, or that would be our next option, which I was really not wanting to do. So again, we took a step back, discussed it together, came to the conclusion that no, we should do this. And it was incredible because she broke my water and immediately she said, oh, and there was some, am I gonna say it right? Marconium in the water. So we knew that that can actually be risky. You know, if we had let it go, that could actually be really detrimental to Ayla's health. And so as my water was breaking and I heard her say that, I was scared for a moment, but then I had this realization, this feeling, and Eric and I talked about, like, I felt like Ayla was trying to talk to me, that I couldn't be so rigid to my birth plan and that I didn't want my water broken. She was actually intuitively trying to tell me I get goosebumps talking about it. It's like she was saying, Mommy, I need help. You know, can you help me? Because this has happened. So from a spiritual standpoint, even that, having my water broken, felt like, oh no, this was such the right thing to do. And I remember as we were sitting there trying to decide whether to break my water, it was quite late at night. And I was confused. I didn't know what choice to make, what was the right decision. And Eric, so beautifully, I think from what we learned in hypnobirthing, he looked at me and he said, you know what, babe, why don't you take a minute and meditate on it? Why don't we turn the lights off? Why don't you put some music on? I had my headphones and my hypnobirthing music. And he said, just go inside yourself and see if there's an answer there. And I don't know if you want to add to that or if you remember that moment. But
I don't remember.
Don't remember that? It was profound to me because he said, kind of look inside yourself and see if the answer's there. And it was. The second I started to meditate, I had this beautiful vision of the little lake where I grew up. And I envisioned Ayla and I sitting on a bench that's dedicated to my dad. He passed about 7 years ago. And I saw it so clearly. Ayla was about 30 and she and I are sitting on this bench at my favorite place in the world, this little lake. And she started asking me about her birth story. It makes me emotional to even think about it. And in that moment, I started telling her the birth story. And I realized as I was meditating on it, that it was perfect just the way it was, that it didn't need to be something other than what it was, because it was hers and it's what she needed and what nature needed to bring her into this world. So anyway, that felt very profound, but it was a skill that we learned in the hypnobirthing class, you know, just to take some time and meditate and go within and find the answer and trust your body, trust yourself, and trust your baby. So felt really profound. And then, yeah, so we broke the water and then tried to labor for a while that night and then realized again I wasn't dilating much. And then I think in the sort of biggest point when we turned to that intention again was the doctor came in and said, you know what, I think we're gonna have to move to a C-section. And Eric and I, by that point, had discussed it and knew that that's what we wanted to do and what was the next step. But now it's midnight and I'd had a really tough day, you know, going through all the tough 3 days, going through all these different things that we'd had to do. And so I didn't want to go into even a C-section. I wanted to try and go into that moment with some calmness and some groundedness and some beauty. And I wanted that even a C-section to be that. So Eric and I talked, and when the doctor came in next, we said, as far as a decision for us, that we really want to take the night and we want to get a little rest and go in fresh for the C-section in the morning, where we can actually feel grounded and present for our baby, who's crying right now. Eric might have to run and give her a little pacifier, but and so we did that, and we said that to the doctor, and she said, oh my gosh, that sounds like a great idea. That way there's a new doctor coming on shift who will be nice and fresh for your C-section first thing. So it just felt like, I get goosebumps again thinking about it, that it wasn't, nothing felt like, even though nothing was expected, we didn't feel forced into anything. We felt like every step of the way, Eric and I had choice and decision in it. So then the next morning we went in for the C-section, which I was nervous about, just because I'm prone to anxiety and just that, an open body surgery like that. I didn't know what to expect. But Eric was right there, and I got to see Ayla, and being totally realistic, the only part of the entire process that I grieve is just the C-section and the moment that I didn't get to see her exit my body. That sort of disconnect is just something I've been working with my therapist on, and a great little support network. But the decision to have the C-section, I never doubted it. It was never, I always felt empowered.
And even with some of the limitations related to COVID and everything else, we still were able to kind of meet all of our needs, make the decisions that we needed to get to the endpoint that we wanted, which was clearly an inevitable endpoint. But the operating room experience was great. I was able to be in there during the surgery, so they were very accommodating in that regard. I remember, seeing Ayla for the first time and how cute and adorable she is, and then getting Ayla to see Katie for the first time was incredible. And then while Katie was recovering a little bit and finishing up in the operating room, we were able to go back, Ayla and I, and do the skin to skin and do all of the first measurement stuff, and that was very new for me. And I'm generally not a very emotional person, but that's that ranks right up there. And then a few minutes later, we went back and saw Katie kind of in her recovery room. And I actually remember seeing that, even though I was a little out of it. I'd had some anti-anxiety medication just going into the C-section. So I was present, but I wasn't so nervous. But I remember them wheeling me into recovery, and I saw Eric in the little room with Ayla on his chest. Makes me emotional to think about. And then and knowing she was safe and with him. And then literally 2 minutes later, they brought her to me, my skin to skin. And she did her little breast crawl right up to my boobie, and she latched immediately. She was a good eater from the moment she was born. And then, and so that just kind of, I guess that idea of feeling empowered and safe just carried us through that whole process. And there was even a couple instances where there was, over the 3 days, there was one nurse that we sort of didn't gel with most of the experience. The staff we were so on the same page with. But even just little incidents like that, our nurse came in and had really strong perfume on, and it was making me sort of nauseous. But I was able to speak up. I kept going back to that birth intention and thinking that, no, this is empowering. This is what's good for me and my body and my baby and her body. And so it really gave me the strength to have a voice when
in all honesty, I'm a recovering codependent. That's something 10 years ago that would have been really hard for me to do. I wouldn't have wanted to upset somebody. And it wasn't that at all. With the hypnobirthing training, I went into it just feeling really like, no, I can speak my truth and I can use my voice and I can get my needs met. And in doing that, Eric was so supportive too, and helping, if there was a nurse that needed to be replaced, we asked for it and the staff did it, and it was not even a big deal. Rather than trying, I could see 10 years ago where I would have gone through a horrible 2 days with this nurse that I didn't gel with. And it would have felt quite traumatic, and it didn't at all. It didn't feel that way at all. So I guess sort of bottom line is that we just took what we learned in the class, and it just, just helped us feel grounded and safe and empowered the whole way through our birth. And Ayla agrees, if you can hear her squeaking in the background. Well, I think with the classes and the teaching, hypnobirthing for sure I would recommend. There was a book, I think, that came up in the hypnobirthing, but it's called Labor Like a Goddess. I loved it. It was such a good book, and it really helped me sort of set the stage for our labor and delivery to be a good experience. And I actually love that we did our hypnobirthing late in the training late in our pregnancy. So I think we had the last class like 2 weeks before we delivered. And I actually kind of liked doing it late in the 3rd trimester because it felt so fresh going into the birthing experience. Some of the other ones, like I looked into Bradley method, which could have been interesting too, but it started so much sooner. It was like months and months of training. And yeah, I just preferred that. Other recommend. Oh, do you want to talk about? So we have this thing called the SNOO, which we would totally recommend to people. It's just a little bassinet that kind of shakes and wiggles and makes these sounds. But I remember even when we were talking about it in the hypnobirthing class, Care was amazing and kind of reminded us or talked about the fact, without any judgment about products or SNOOs, but just talked about the fact that babies are meant to be held and picked up and nurtured and comforted. So she's squeaking. So that meant a lot because we would use it as a little bassinet. Like if she was fussy, we could calm her down, but for the most part, we would always go and pick her up and hold her and then set her back down, and it would wiggle and she'd fall back to sleep. So I don't know, it just felt like a nice little hybrid of.
Yeah, I would say, don't ever turn down anyone that offers to help. Take advantage of the help that is being offered to you. You'll thank yourself and that person or people in the end. The postpartum coming home, it's all so fresh and new that it's tough. That it's not easy. And we knew that kind of going into it. Care kind of reminded us that it's a whole new world. You're learning together. You're trying to adjust to a new life in the house and a whole new routine. So taking advantage of some of that helps with that, but also being able to relate to each other and to support each other and make sure that we're approaching this as a team and not just individuals. Some people say that your old life is over. And maybe it is, but I think that the new life is a beautiful thing and something that you don't have to permanently say goodbye to your old life. You have to ease into the new one and see where you can fit in some of the stuff that you enjoy from your old.
That was actually, I remember during the hypnobirthing class, there was an awesome exercise towards the end of it where you kind of each sort of went through your biggest fears and then you talked about them as a couple. And just to piggyback on what Eric was just saying, I felt like that was really helpful because again, we didn't none of this was unexpected, right? So after when we're both sort of needing a break, or the things that happen when you're new parents, or the fears that come up, we had talked about them prior too. So it wasn't like they were something new, which made them, I think, a little less scary. And for me, I guess, last little piece of advice, I know it's my first baby and moms can never know how postpartum is going to be. And I almost felt a little offended when the hospital would call it like, oh, you might just have the baby blues for six weeks. And the baby blues just seems to totally underestimate and undervalue the process that's actually happening as a woman postpartum. And my experience was that it's such a spectrum of things that were happening, even up to 6 months now. And having resources like a hypnobirthing teacher, a postpartum doula, a therapist. Again, it gives me goosebumps because it was such a powerful support network for me as I was having these postpartum symptoms to say, oh no, I'm not losing my mind. I'm not crazy. This is just a hormone spell or a hormone flash. And then I'd feel okay. And I could articulate it to Eric, and I could talk to my therapist or my doula about it. And again, it felt empowered even in the postpartum process, and even when it was hard. But it was not scary, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
It's the best thing to ever happen to us. So.
Aw, she's amazing. We're so lucky to have her. Sometimes we look at her and we can't believe it because it took 10.5 years for her to get here. So Eric and I kind of look at each other like, are we gonna have to give her back soon? And then we're like, no, we get to keep her.